joined right now by Mo Lovatt, who's Programme Coordinator at the Academy of Ideas, and joins us to talk about, well, various free speech stories. Very good afternoon to you, Mo.
Hi there, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk first of all about Lucy Connolly, who constantly is referred to in the media as a Tory councillor's wife or a former Tory councillor's wife. She's got a name herself. Her name is Lucy Connolly. She is serving 31 months behind bars after pleading guilty to a charge of inciting racial hatred for a post she wrote last July 29th. That was the day of the horrific Southport attack by ex-Garda in which he killed 3 little girls, stabbed many others, life-changing injuries for them. And she wrote in the Post, I can't read out all the words because it's that horrific. Mass deportation now, set fire to all the effing hotels full of the B word. For all I care, if that makes me racist, so be it. Now, that post was viewed more than 300,000 times before she deleted it under 4 hours later. She found herself arrested, wasn't allowed bail, pleaded guilty, has not been given any of the normal privileges that a non-violent first-time offender, a mother and carer as she is, would normally be given by prison governors. There have been various complaints about that. Alison Pearson, the Telegraph, has written up the difficulties her family and she are going through behind bars. She's got an appeal that's going to be heard on Thursday. Should she be let out? Should her case be thrown out, do you think?
Yes, and also I think if I was a betting woman, I think she probably will win that appeal. The question is whether it should have happened in the first place, and the disproportionate nature of the sentence. I think that's what that's what concerns most people, especially free speech advocates like myself. And the reason I think she'll probably be successful is she's got a lot of high-profile figures backing her. Liz Truss has come out in support. She's got the backing, we should say, of the Free Speech Union, who really, they know their stuff, and they will be backing her. And also there's been an awful lot of press and public outrage at the conduct of the police. This whole thing about policing what people say in a tweet, just an expression, isn't it? So I think for all those reasons, the police force will have to, take stock of their behaviour. Hopefully they will. But I think she'd probably win that appeal.
Yeah,
but
I think you're a bit more hopeful than me. I was thinking actually there's an element where actually the public profile could almost do damage. And I have to say I'm very much in debt to my good friend Alison Pearson for giving us more details on that case, because actually a lot of the stuff that came out about that case, I was very damning of her when I first heard about it, because it was a horrible, nasty tweet. It wasn't my reaction to even the rumours that we saw online before we knew it was Garda who was responsible. Well, certainly was arrested for and then later convicted of those charges involving the Southport attack. But we were told, there were other racist tweets she'd written, and it was all just kind of drummed up. Whereas in fact, when you actually see the tweets that she wrote, they weren't racist at all. That she had basically people sort of character references from many of the families whose children she was childminder for, who were, many of them were immigrants themselves, people of colour, who were saying there's no experience whatsoever ever being racist, quite the opposite, and they gave good character references. She was a carer for her husband who was unwell, for her young child. There were so many reasons why in any other case, even if she'd committed a theft or a violent crime, that she would not have gone behind bars for a first offence. But somehow this tweet that was up for 3.5 hours was beyond the pale and deserved to be punished, and the book was thrown at her. I think the big issue is that she, like many other people in that scenario, pleaded guilty because they were told, you're not going to get bail, your case isn't going to come to court for 6 months or what, you're better off pleading guilty, you'll get a softer sentence and you'll be out. And of course, pretty much the opposite happened, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the reason I'm slightly more, it depends on the judge, doesn't it? And we can talk about this kind of institutional capture that we've had of our police force and our court system and all the rest of it, because that, you're right to point out that, there's possibility with the wrong judge, she won't win her appeal. But, you can't prosecute people on the grounds of the fact that their case has caused media and public interest. Yeah. That's just not. It's not part of our judicial system, so hopefully we'll get a sensible judge. But I mean, you talked about some of those mitigating factors, Julia. The other thing is, her tweet, I completely agree with you, completely condemn what she said. It's one thing to have an opposition to immigration policy, but to be hateful of immigrants, and it was, that particular tweet was anyway. But, she had also lost a daughter.
Very good point,
So, if
so when little girls were being stabbed to death, she had a much more lots of us had a visceral reaction to that, but even more so having lost her own child.
Exactly. I think, I would question even the incitement. I know riots followed what she said, but it's not causation necessarily. Whether you can be charged for incitement is, I think, quite dodgy ground, because you or I wouldn't go out and do something just because somebody tweeted something. Why do we assume that other people will as well?
And isn't that the interesting thing? But I think for a lot of people, what is most galling is that it does seem that what someone writes down on social media now is often punished more severely, and police turn up much more quickly than what most of us would consider to be actual crimes, whether they are violence, whether they are theft, people's houses, cars, phones, mobiles stolen or burgled. I mean, and the police far too busy. Look, we had the very high-profile case, didn't we, of Alison Pearson, when police turned up on her door accusing her. She thought of a non-crime hate incident. It turns out it wasn't. It was actually an actual hate crime. Of course, she's still waiting for an apology, which I'm pretty sure she's going to get from Essex Police. We've also got the Kent Police, by all accounts, reviewing an investigation into a retired special constable. This is Julian Fawkes, 71-year-old. He was handcuffed at his home by 6 officers from Kent Police back in November 2023. He was interrogated. He was handcuffed in his own home as officers searched his home. When we saw the footage on their body cams, so it's finally been released, Telegraph publicised this story, absolutely astounding. There was no crime. He was accused over a social media post regarding the threat of anti-Semitism. He was basically defending Jews and criticising someone and a policy of these for being anti-Semitic. There was absolutely nothing wrong in his social media post whatsoever, and anyone with half a brain reading it would know that. But 6 officers turned up, but they then went through his possessions and his books. They were particularly concerned, apparently, by there being, copies of the Spectator magazine, but also books by Douglas Murray, our good friend here, describing them as very Brexity things. What did you make of that when you heard of that at the Academy of Ideas?
Sort of outraged, and also it's hilarious, very Brexity things. What on earth does that mean? And also it was a legitimate vote that we had to leave the European Union. So, but the police should not be judging whether somebody's a good person or a bad sort just based on their reading material. It's not their business. They're there to find out if a crime's being committed. And as you say, Julian Fawkes didn't commit a crime. In fact, he was standing up to some of the anti-Semitism. And again, a bit like with the Lucy Connolly, he was outraged by that storming of the airport in Russia with people looking for Jews to persecute.
And basically saying it could happen here,
Yeah, absolutely. And, despite all the Holocaust education we've had in this country, the fact that they couldn't notice that Martin Nimer quote about first they came for the Jews sort of thing just goes to show you. But, in contrast to the Connolly case, poor old Julian Fawkes, he'd had 26 views on that tweet, 26 views, and there'd been no public outcry. So what on earth are our police doing? Are they just sitting in their offices scouring social media for something that might be deemed offensive?
Someone made a complaint, it would appear. But again, we have that with the non-crime agents, just because someone thinks that, not even themselves, but someone else might take offence, please get involved. But again, there's always a judgment, isn't there? Someone makes a decision to send those 6 coppers. Why 6? Why not 1? Same with, a couple turning up on Alison Pearson's door and other instances we've seen. It is just extraordinary that these are the things they choose to investigate. And this is all about, isn't it? It is about policing thought. And the argument has always been, we understand from the College of Policing, that actually if you tackle this, there's a whole theory about this, isn't it? If you tackle these sort of supposedly low-level sort of comments on social media, you can prevent violent crime and racism and later on. No evidence for this whatsoever, of course.
No, the theory even goes on to say it's a slippery slope towards genocide. Some of the theories, it's utterly ridiculous. But who are the College of Policing? They're not a democratic, accountable organisation. They're the ones training our police officers. I think it's about time we really looked at these institutions.
Oh, no.
Way they've been
I don't want to look at them. I just want them gone. I just want them gone. Mo Lovatt, so good to talk to you from the Academy of Ideas. Thank you very much. Another organisation, brilliant organisation, standing up for free speech. Some say to you at Spiked Online have been absolutely brilliant on this issue, I have to say. It is terrifying because, again, we talked about this yesterday. There is an element where, again, Yeah, okay, well, yeah, but you didn't end up the criminal record. He got a caution, but they're going to get rid of that. That's fine. Oh, well, no, he didn't go to prison. It's, you know, and we had the consequence. There are consequences to freedom of speech, and you have to live with them, like Lucy Connolly, etc. But actually, again, it's always the process is the punishment. People go through this. It's incredibly upsetting and scary for people.
No, the way in which the police are just brushing this off is outrageous. The incredible stress and strain and shame and all the things that happen when you get a knock at the door. When
police turning up at your door. Can you imagine all your neighbours seeing that?
I know, and you know, the 6 police officers showing up at Julian Fawkes' door, walking out of his house with evidence bags. You would have thought he was involved in organised crime. One of the heartbreaking things in the story was he told the Telegraph that he was terrified they'd think he was some kind of sex offender or something like this, you know, pulling hard drives out of his
No, if he was a sex offender, they wouldn't turn up and bother.
No, exactly. He was slapping the wrist and then,
Silly.
you know, don't do it again. But it's one of those things where also, you know, being handcuffed, being arrested, sitting in a cell for 8 hours, not knowing what is going to take place. This is an incredibly stressful thing to happen to you. We've had cases recently of Maxie Allen and Rosalind Levine in Borehamwood who got arrested because they were complaining about their child's school too vigorously. Arrested in
by
front
email. Not allowed to write any more emails, but they weren't allowed to communicate any other way.
Arrested in front of their disabled daughter. Like, this is horrendous behaviour. And what is so chilling about those 2 cases in particular is neither of them have broken the law. They went through all of this process. There wasn't a law that had been broken, and yet all of this horrendous treatment happened.
And again, by the way, it all happened under the Tories. Did nothing about it. They talked a good game, never did anything about it.
It's the story of our times.
Absolutely. Almost tying in with the immigration thing. But anyway.